Welcome everyone. We are SHOR, the official podcast of MDI, and today we have a very esteemed guest with us, Mr. Ajay Kumar. And today we'll deep dive into the corridors of policy and innovation with none other than Mr. Ajay Kumar, who was the longest serving Defence Secretary of India. He has played a key role in transforming India's defence landscape and spearheading India's defence and digital revolutions. An alumnus of IIT Kanpur, he was a key part of the team that implemented key initiatives of Digital India, including UPI, Aadhaar, GEM, among many others. He currently runs MGF-Kavachh VC fund to support Indian entrepreneurs working in the deep tech space. Get ready for a conversation that blends experience, innovation, and obviously entrepreneurship. So, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you very much, Naveen. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, sir, first of all, I'd like to start by talking about your childhood and how you were as a student.
So, my childhood was spent in Kanpur, and for most of the time I was, it was a school where, most of the other students were from business families in Kanpur.
Okay.
And I invariably stood either first or second, and I thought I was a bright student, Later on only I discovered that, just because I was doing well in school did not necessarily mean that I was bright at a larger scale, when I joined IIT, and so it was a different experience altogether.
Yeah. And so you said that you were a topper at school, and so when you went to IIT, so how was that like? Because IITs today compared to IITs back in the day, I'm assuming the 80s, so they're a completely different world because the kind of opportunities we have right now. So back then it was just about, I think most of the people went abroad. So how was that like, and when you compare it with today, what's the difference, major difference that you see?
Yeah, I think today IIT has a huge brand. But in terms of quality and excellence, IITs were possibly even better than today.
Okay.
There was no professional coaching system through which people, students, go through years of coaching before they get admitted. And when we got into, I, for example, never went for any coaching or any, and I was fortunate to get into IIT after 11th.
Yeah.
And this was practically out of school. And once I went to IIT, I found that the freedom was extremely new to me. Staying in hostel, having anything and everything, a lot of friends all the time to talk to, enjoy. And I was a sports lover, so in my first couple of years in IIT, I was spending most of the time playing and, having a good time with friends. Because of which my grades, I suddenly realized, although I was in electrical, which was among the top departments in IIT that time, my grades were, I was in the bottom half of the class. But, at that time, then you suddenly realize that, something clicks. And thereafter, I think I started doing well, particularly once I came into the department.
Okay.
And eventually passed with distinction and a very good position. So,
And so, how did?
And those days, most of the people who did well were going to US because that was an easy pathway to go to the US. Most IIT Kanpur was set up with the aid from 9 US universities, so it was particularly easy for Kanpur students to go to US. 90% of my batch from electrical, or even more possibly, went to the US. It was around that time that we thought that we should stay back in India, and those days civil services IS seemed a very good option. So we thought we'll write the IS instead of going abroad.
Yeah. So it's kind of a coincidence that if you had gone abroad, because most of the people end up doing a PhD or working in deep tech, and you are now doing your stuff.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say this, and I always think that one of the reasons why I did two things in life later on. One is I did my PhD from US, Masters and PhD from US, which was one of the, somewhere bottom of my heart, I think I always had the desire to do higher studies in the US. And I fulfilled it by doing my Masters and PhD in US. And then second is, I think somewhere at the bottom of my heart, I also had the desire to work in technology area. Of course, I must say in the government also, I've been fortunate to work in IT and tech area, and defense also a lot of technology happens there. So a big part of my career has been spent there. But now I am hands-on with technology and.
Yeah. So you must be a technology lover. So sir, so another question is that you had a very long career, almost 4 decades. So what have been your biggest 1 or 2 learning that you would like to embark about leadership or about managing people or just people in general?
So, the biggest thing I feel is when we joined the government, everyone said that government is about conforming. You have to conform to a particular system, procedure, practices. And I somehow felt that would have, maybe for some time maybe I was also doing that. But pretty early in my life, I think 4 or 5 years down my work career, I realized that possibly if you are just conforming, you are wasting your time. Using strong words here, but the best decision which I took in my life was to question everything that was happening around me. And if it felt to me, if I was convinced that that was not the right way to do it, then try to change it. And honestly speaking, I had, I really enjoyed my time in the government, both in the state and the center, simply following this one philosophy of working, that if there is something wrong, do not accept that it has been done for decades or centuries. It's been handed over, it is documented in various manuals. If it's not right, it should not be done. And someone has to change it, because whoever wrote those rules, manuals, were people like us. And if I always thought if people like me were not to change it, it would be, it would not be fair to expect lower bureaucracy to be able to change it. So my whole career has been about change in my environment wherever I work. And to that extent, sometimes, and this is something which people told me recently, and I think I identify with that now, is that I have been an entrepreneur within the government. I always try to do new things in the government in every job. When I was in Kerala, we started more IT parks in Kerala than has been before my tenure or after my tenure. And to attract that scale of investment in Kerala in IT was kind of a big leap of faith. Today, of course, Kerala has a fairly big IT industry. I had opportunity, for example, to carry out the biggest VRS in the history of Kerala in a communist-led government, when we sent out 1/3 of Keltron employees. Keltron was one of the most difficult organizations, hugely loss-making, and we carried out some of the biggest reforms that time in Keltron. Thanks to that, today Keltron is the only state and electronics development corporation which is surviving, doing reasonably well, and and people in Keltron remember me for the work that I did during that period. The point was, it was even after that also in Kerala, there has been no other case of such large-scale VRS. And just because we thought it was necessary, I thought, like I said, if you think it's not right, then you have to change it.
So sir, we'll move on to your long list of accomplishments, but I would want to talk about, you talked about Keltron. So what other accomplishment are you most proud of? Like that when you look back, think that was the most, it could be a small thing, it could be a large thing, anything that you're very, very proud of.
So, I'm very proud of something which is not known very well, and it's nothing to do with technology. I was collector Palghat in Kerala, and Palghat has a tribal block which is one of the most backward areas of Kerala, called Attapadi. And way back then, it was very, the infrastructure is also not very good. It was easier to reach Attapadi through Tamil Nadu than to go through our own state, although there was a road, but it was very difficult terrain. Being a tribal block, there were a lot of funds that were available for its development, and those funds used to be channelized through a tribal development project, with a project officer stationed in Attapadi, senior officer stationed in Attapadi who used to do, which meant that whether it was education, whether it was health, whether it was food, practically everything was more or less free available to the tribal and their children there. But the tragedy was, and I'm talking of 1992, there was not one child who had passed class 10th from Attapadi by that time, despite the fact that every child would get free education, free clothing, free food, and there were schools for them in the block because of the funding that used to come, but yet not one. What would happen was they would all come to class 10th and fail there because till 9th it was internal exam and they would get pass. He started a project called Giri Vikas as collector, and what we did was we got some NY Nehru Yuva Kendra youth who were unemployed, who had done graduation in various subjects, got them to agree to, to teach these students. We hired a house, and collector has this freedom, so we created a scheme, and I remember for about 1.75 lakhs for a year.
Okay.
Those were cheap days, and and we picked up 30 boys who were all 10th fail, as I said. And we had a person who acted as a warden, and we brought them to Palghat in this
almost
house.
Like a boarding school.
Like a small boarding school, or more of a ashram kind of thing. These students, when they came, they could not write their names fully. That was although they were 10th fail, but they couldn't write their name. That was the status. And once when we brought them, we put them into some disciplined life, proper food, etc., which they were totally unwilling to do.
Okay.
So within first week, majority of them ran back to their block, ran away one day. There we used our collectors, influence, and we went there and got them back with some fear and some convincing. They came back. To cut the long story short, and these Nehru Yuva Kendra volunteers were teaching them. After 1 year, all these people, there are a lot of other negative things that go on in the tribal areas, including drinking and promiscuous living and all that. These people are now in a very structured life. You will be surprised, all 30 of them passed SLC, class 10th.
Wow.
And that's very important because those days and even now, for most government jobs, if you are an ST candidate, class 10th is the
bare minimum
is a minimum requirement. In Kerala those days, most of the ST jobs would go vacant because there wouldn't be candidates who would be. So if you were class 10th, you would immediately
get a job,
common job, which means you have a certain assured minimum level of life. And all 30 of them passed.
Wow.
Next year we became bolder. So I was there in 3 years, and we got girls also. We created another facility for the girls, and girls was even a bigger challenge. But we got a doctor associated to attend to their medical requirements, etc. And then girls passed. And fast forward, very soon, so these 30 people who passed, we thought they may go for government jobs. Like I said, there was opportunity. Most of them went for higher education. They joined 11th, 12th, and then the college. And after a few years, of course, I had moved out of Palghat by that time. One of the girls became a doctor.
Wow.
And she became a medical doctor, and she did very well. The Kerala government was so, we were spending those days several crores of rupees on Attapadi, on education. And here with this 1.75 lakh rupees per year, we had no one who had passed 10th. We had suddenly 30 students the first year, and over the years, many more.
Okay.
Now, of course, fully Attapadi, most students are like any other community, they are all fully educated. But both boys and girls started getting educated, And then Kerala government actually replicated this model across the state.
Yeah.
And today it continues as a scheme. Of course, like most government schemes, once they become scheme, they tend to become extremely, government bureaucratic in their approach. But still, it's considered to be one of those very prestigious things, which tribal students are able to benefit from. So I'm very proud of the fact that what happened, and it was social reform that you saw in front of your house. In fact, the media started calling them Collectorude Kuttigal in Malayalam, which means collector's children. Because I used to go and meet them, inquire about their welfare, check about their progress, etc. so often that and we are a team of couple of extremely sincere and committed officers who actually were my eyes and arms to implement this scheme. But I think I'm very proud of that.
So this is almost like Kerala's own Super 30 before the one from Bihar emerged.
At a different level though.
Yeah.
Not in the,
so which year was this?
This is 92 to 94. 3 years I was there in Palghat.
So this was right after the Great 91 reforms that we
had.
So sir, we'll move on to your current role as a VC, and then we'll talk about defense secretary. Sir, so it is very unusual for a bureaucrat to become a fund manager. So how did this transformation happen, and why did you choose this?
So I don't know. I mean, like I said, I've always been interested in this space. And during my tenure in defense, I recognized that the huge potential of startups in the country. I mean, I saw for myself such amazing stories of success that I was fully convinced that if the government, whichever part of the government,
incentivizes them.
Not incentivizes, it just lets them be themselves and not come in their way. You don't have to give anything. We did not do anything in defense, honestly. A very meager amount of 1.5 crores for something which would cost hundreds of crores is kind of money we were giving, which was paltry, Our startups could, they're better, as good or better than the best in the world. So therefore we thought that's very important. So I was convinced of this. So when I came out, and during my defense secretary days, in fact towards the end of it, when the startup movement had really started building up, we had also approached the VC community to come and support the defense startups.
Very few came.
Unfortunately, very few came because they were still in India. Most of the VCs were happy with software, e-commerce, fintech, and such stuff. Defense space was not the in thing. So there was a gap there. I was convinced that this actually is the real opportunity, much bigger opportunity than people think in terms of software services, and therefore. When I came, I was approached by a few people saying that they were interested in doing this, and I said I'm very happy to be part of that effort.
So especially, sir, you have written about your startups that have done remarkable work. For example, Third Eye Tech, QNew was another one. So they have completely transformed the kind of work that they could do and saved the government hundreds of crores of rupees, if not more. So sir, you have closed one investment as of today, which is Galaxy. So how did that become? It's in the space tech domain. So how would it?
So we have now closed 4, and we are in advanced stage of closing another couple of them. So the fund in itself is on a momentum now, and initially we were setting up things and we were learning as we went. Now we understand the ecosystem. People are also very good companies are coming. And if anything, I must say that my experience in VC shows me that whatever belief I had is fully validated. If anything, more than that. And we get to see such amazing work being done by some of the startups. Every single startup that we have signed, I am extremely proud of them. And we are convinced that they are able to be the world beaters in their particular specific domain. And some of the things on which government has in the past spent hundreds of crores or thousands of crores to solve those problems, technology problems. For example, turbines. There are startups who are creating turbines and which are now already small turbines they have created, and they're moving to bigger turbines.
Yeah.
We are creating an ecosystem of creating, because engines is something that we still import.
Yeah, we have a question on that.
And we have spent hundreds and thousands of crores of rupees on trying to develop that in the past. We have today an ecosystem which I am sure that over the next few years you will see indigenous turbine capability in this country.
Wow. That would be a really big deal.
So and this is just, and in every field you see the beauty of this ecosystem is, for example, we had very limited capabilities in space outside of ISRO.
Yeah.
Today, if you look at POEM experimental module, that is a PSLV orbital experimental module, which ISRO takes with a lot of payloads.
Yeah.
Nearly 50% of these payloads belong to startups. Which means today the effort of ISRO is getting augmented by what the startups are doing in large area. ISRO created, last week you may have read, ISRO did the first space docking. There are startups who are already very close to doing this, and all in about 2 years' time. So it has taken them such a short period, and they're actually doing more than that. They have plans. So they don't, docking by itself is just an experiment.
Yeah.
What you really want to do is to do life extension of satellites while it is in orbit.
Yeah.
And startups are already working on this. So the point I'm making, again saying back, is that if there is a free environment for enterprise to function in the deep tech space, I think we see best results. And we are, the government has taken a number of policy steps to actually open up the environment. Defense, I was part of the process which did that. After that also government has been doing this. So I think there is a huge opportunity for VCs and for other people who are investing in the space to be part of this growth journey that we are seeing. In fact, not growth journey, it's an explosion that's happening.
Exactly, sir. So, sir, so space tech, you're very bullish on that. But sir, I read somewhere that ISRO is now losing the cost advantage that it had to private players. Like SpaceX has really caught up in terms of the cost advantage that India used to enjoy back in the day. So do you think that would dent some of the bullishness that you have on this?
No, I think we have to see it in the right perspective. See, ISRO designs satellites which are bigger, complexer, multitask oriented. This is the model of the past, because sending a satellite in space was a big deal, and it was an infrequent event. SpaceX, of course, has been the leader in this, which has totally changed this paradigm. They create application-specific, cheap, disposable satellites, which can be, it's a use and throw model. And they have created, ability to launch, and shuttle can come back after launching. So you are able to launch more frequently. Multiple satellites can go on one launch vehicle. And for each application you have a satellite which is short life. So previously satellites will have 30 years life. Now satellite has 2 years life. And after that it will create space debris problem in future, and that will have to be dealt with. But this is the model. That is why SpaceX is so cheaper. Many of our startups are also using that. So they are also today going for the application specific small satellites which are very clearly targeted for a particular object. And therefore they are also, so today ISRO was supposed to be one of the most cost efficient. Startups are even more cost efficient than ISRO. And I'm sure SpaceX, of course, is huge volumes. If they were able to compete with SpaceX in terms of volume, will be cheaper than SpaceX also.
Great, sir. So, sir, you're running a VC fund right now. So, do you think it is possible within the government institution, within the government, to have its own VC fund? I know as part of the reform that you did, you earmarked 1,000 crores exclusively for startups for procurement. But having a VC fund is a different thing. So, is it possible within the government to have a VC fund? Because CIA, as an example, they have one, and they have created a national champion like in the US, Palantir. So is it possible to have that here in India?
So now space, for example, government has announced a VC fund within the government. But even before that, state governments used to have VC funds.
Okay.
Kerala had a VC fund. Karnataka had a VC fund. Andhra had a VC fund for IT. And I'm talking about those days when IT was kind of just coming up. So states used to have their own VC funds. State funds, now SIDBI had a VC fund, and in some ways SIDBI is funded by the government. So it is SIDBI had a VC fund. Our IT ministry also had a VC fund which SIDBI used to manage. So it's not that it is totally new. However, by definition, government agencies are risk averse. And therefore, whereas
VC is a very high risk game.
I mean, the whole idea is you have to believe there is nothing which will be on paper to show you that this particular idea will succeed. At that time when you want to invest. Whereas what happens is because of their risk averse nature, state VCs tend to want to have some confidence that this is already a successful venture. So at that time it's more of a growth story. So they are really funding growth. They are not funding the ideas, initial idea, etc. So that challenge comes. But that is why the fund of fund model has been. And in fact, the first fund of fund was done by METI as the Electronic Development Fund, which I had kind of had a privilege to start. This was approved by the government, although this was conceived in 2012-13. It was approved after Prime Minister Modi came to power in August 2014. One of the first things he did after coming to power. And it was launched, it was very successful. And then in January 2015, the major fund of fund was launched.
And so my question is because so within the IDEX that you also started, you have Aditi, you have a bunch of other things as well. You have the competitions. So my question is because I was going through their website and I realized that a lot of startups are doing amazing work, but we're not really selling the story because on the website also it's not easy to find those. I know there are certain national security concerns and we can't disclose everything, but I think these are startups that we should be promoting as like huge success stories because they can be the poster boys of the deep tech space. So do you think we need to work more on this and the government needs to work more, or do you think it's the fault of the startups that they're not coming forward and telling their own story?
No, I think so. We must realize, and it's a great question, first of all, I must say, and this is something which I have written also recently. Most governments world over, particularly Western countries, and even socialist, communist countries as well, it is part of their duty that they promote their industry, and I'm not even talking startups, when they are in a foreign country. Look at now how Trump is quite clearly and openly promoting that you have, which is, as a country, while we promote industry at a macro level, we support industry, but when it will come to, we do not have the culture or the mindset
to back our own people,
to back a company, because our mindset is that suppose the government is backing a winner, then what is your interest in doing that? And therefore, in fact, I have written this that it should be part of state policy to promote export from our startups. And I've written this in the context of defense exports, in the context of IDEX startups, that every country in the world, and when we used to go for these bilateral negotiations, the main agenda the other side is promoting their companies, whereas we would be talking of cooperation, etc., which is also fine, but we would never have the, we would as a policy would not go and promote individual companies' products. So that is, I think that's a cultural shift which needs to be brought about. Safeguards have to be there because we do not want the government to be creating vested interest in promoting some companies and not promoting others. But these mechanisms exist in the world, and I think we have to move, because to be able to create global brands, to be able to create global companies, government has a very important role to play. For example, in COVID. See, in COVID, we went and promoted a vaccine. And that is why today Indian vaccine became so popular. Of course, COVID being COVID, no one questioned, why Covaxin or any other Indian vaccine was being promoted. But I think we should do this as a matter of regular government work.
So, sir, now I'll very briefly talk about the long list of reforms that you did as a Defense Secretary. So, I've written it down, some of them. So, your tenure was nothing short of legendary because I think decades worth of reforms were done in a few years, starting from the creation of the post of CDS and then the mammoth task of corporatization of the OFBs, earmarking 2/3 defense budget for Indian firm, which is approximately 75,000 crores, starting programs like IDEX we already discussed, implementing Agnibath, and then enabling India to become a defense exporter, and then liberalized drone making as well. Now we also pushed the defense negative import list, and most importantly, which I think is very important, was allowing the use of government testing labs and ranges for private firms and third-party testing. And then you also made compliance easy for defense offset liabilities, and then EDF we talked about. So, sir, I want to talk about this, and which is a lot of personal interest of mine, is that how did you achieve corporatizing OFBs? Because it's a 200-year-old institution, infamous for efficiencies, and employs around 80,000 people. So that I'm sure there are definitely a lot of anecdotes and challenges that you face.
So I think a lot of this credit should go to the Prime Minister and to the Raksha Mantri, because it's not that this is rocket science for anyone to have discovered that this needs to be corporatized. Actually, the fact is that over the last 20 years, there have been at least half a dozen committees who have recommended this should be corporatized. And and we all knew that this needed to be corporatized. And there were some, quite alarming kind of difficulties or challenges that were being faced. The question was whether the government will have the political will to do that reform.
Okay.
And that is why I said, so we made our proposals and all that, and posted to the government. When I say government, I'm the political government leadership. And everyone was convinced that there's a need. The question was, because defense is an important strategic sector, you don't want to disrupt whatever production capability. You don't want. OFB had 52 factories spread across, and I'm forgetting this number, maybe over 17 states, around 1 lakh employees. So, large numbers, So it has put, and 1 lakh employees means if you take an average of 5 for a family, or 5 lakh people directly, and then indirectly so many vendors and suppliers. So there's a huge ecosystem which was dependent on it. Most OEB factories are townships in whichever area they are located. So big. So idea was that it should not create an upheaval which is uncontrolled also. And I think that is where the main trick was. And in 2020, we were given the green signal to go ahead and do this. Cabinet approval was obtained, and thereafter, we were aided by the fact that it was COVID time, so which didn't, people were scared to assemble and collect together and do things. But even then, as a precaution, we came out with an ordinance which was never used, but which made it a criminal offense for anyone to prevent smooth functioning, because OFBs were functioning during the COVID because of all defense establishments were functioning, so that defense preparedness was not affected. So anyone who prevented that work, obstructed that work, this was a criminal offense, he could be arrested. And an special ordinance was passed with a life of 1 year. Idea was that if we could transit 1 year, then by the time the new corporate entities would have come and all that. So that ordinance was also passed by the government, and which later on was passed as an act of parliament. But after 1 year, which lapsed. It had a life of 1 year, and which lapsed also. So all the transition was pretty smooth. And I must credit the leadership. There was a group of ministers that was formed under chairmanship of Raksha Mantri Shri Rajnath Singh, and with Home Minister Amit Shah and some other top leaders who were part of the group of ministers, who showed tremendous amount of sagacity and empathy for the workers who possibly would have concerns. So as a result, the trick in these things is to be able to calibrate in a manner that you don't tilt the apple cart too much. And so that we did the reform, but the reaction was not strong enough to prevent it. In fact, we also highlighted, so once we did it, so some of the things that we did, for example, was we ensured that the order flow for the new corporate, because once you're a corporate entity, as a government department, they used to get orders directly without tender, because it's a government entity.
Yeah.
Government cannot tender to itself.
Yeah.
But once they become corporate entities, their orders will have to follow the process. So we ensured that the order flows were maintained for the first few years. We ensured that suitable, because they would not become viable from day one. So they would need money, support, assistance. So next 3 to 4, I'm forgetting this now, 4 years or something, grant assistance was assured so that they would have time to build up their capacities and become viable. It was assured that whatever existing terms and conditions of employees would not be changed retrospectively, and anything, because if I am an employee who has joined the job in a particular terms and conditions, these cannot be changed midway for me. So those kind of safeguards were done, and it was a continuous process. It's not that you take one decision and you implement it. You have to continuously monitor what is the evolving situation and then take decisions to address that situation. And we were fortunate.
And some of the DPSUs are doing really well now.
And out of them, at least 3 or 4 of them are doing exceedingly well, up to the 7th.
So sir, so I want to talk about DRDO as well. So CDOT, CDAC, so they have done amazingly well, especially with the BSNL 4G equipment that they're providing by partnering with TCS and all. And ISRO has been a superstar for many years. So, and also, to be fair to DRDO, they have done like amazing work, and some of the TOT transfer technology that they have done. For example, I was reading about Shiva TechSam. So they got the technology from one of the DRDO labs, and they are now doing very well, and they have improved upon that. So how can you make DRDO more efficient, and how can you create superstars out of the products that they develop?
So first of all, I want to say that I worked in IT, and so I know the IT organizations, CDAC, CDOT. I worked in defense, I know DRDO. I've not worked in space, but I fairly well know ISRO. And it's my view that all these organizations have fulfilled a role in the context of what they were assigned. But by definition, I think we cannot expect them to be able to deliver what country as a whole can do. What I mean to say is that when, for example, DRDO had 42 labs or something, and each lab will have, let's say, 4 or 5 groups. So we had about 200 groups. So if each group is doing one problem at a time, and it takes 4 or 5 years to do, so you can take that many problems only to address. But in defense, for example, you have thousands of problems, even more than that, tens of thousands of problems. Same is the case with CDAC or CDOT or ISRO or any other government organization. They will be limited because the size is limited by the budget, and therefore that puts a limit. Whereas if you create an ecosystem, then you are able to do multiple things together because the ecosystem is functioning, and not all of them requires government money. Only maybe some incentive or some market creation which will itself incentivize. Then the government doesn't even have to come in the picture. Which is what you see in IDEX, or which you see now in space. Like I mentioned to you today, space startups are doing in the last 2 years itself, 2.5 years of space startup journey. You are seeing so much of action, which has 70, 50, 60 years of ISRO journey. What has been able to achieve, they have been able to do in 2 to 3 years. And same is for look at what CDAC or CDOT. What they just did, CDOT could never do. What can't really think of any of the IT products which today are IT industry. Of course, is such a wonderful thing. I mean, you can't expect CDAC to be able to have delivered that. So I think the problem is in the structuring of the whole model. Therefore, we need these labs, but we need to supplement this effort from an open ecosystem which is incentivized and promoted by the government. And I think that is where I think the best of both worlds will start to flourish. So I don't think and I don't think DRDO has anyway fared lesser than any of the other public sector organizations. If anything, I think DRDO has done a fantastic work, but not enough for the country. If we, because that's why, see, in other sectors, I mean, look, if whichever sector you see, if we needed something, we had to import, despite all these organizations. In IT, we imported all our electronics. In telecom, we imported all our telecom. In defense, we imported all our defense equipment. In space, we did not import, but we did not have anything. I mean, we did not have communications, we did not. Now that we are having for the first time OneWeb, it's all satellites which are created outside. So the point I'm making is that in any of these sectors, this model of only relying on a monopoly public sector has its limitations. And the beauty of this is something else. The beauty is that the individuals who work in these organizations are brilliant people. Many of the ISRO scientists are today the top startups in the field. Many of the DRDO scientists are top startups in defense. And I'm sure, although I don't know personally, but I'm sure many of the CDOT or CDAC people will be top scientists when they go out in their respective areas as well. So the point is, the individuals who work there are very good. But the structure and monopoly possibly does not create the right incentive alignment for them to be able to produce world class. Second is there is limitation of scale, because no matter how big these organizations become, they're still a small from a country's perspective. If you create ecosystems, they really grow up in such a big manner that they're able to cater to the national needs. And that is where I think the difference is. But I don't think DRDO is any way inferior to any of the other organizations.
Yes, sir. So I was also reading about NIC, National Informatics Center. You were the DG of that. So, sir, the kind of work that they do and the scale that they manage is just amazing. Because if a similar structure would exist in the private sector, I'm sure it would be valued at a lot of money. So, sir, do you see any startups that were part of IDEX, Aditi or Sprint that can emerge as national champions? I know Garuda Aerospace is one that has been
so many.
Third iTech is also
so many of them.
So do you
I see in defense and space itself. In fact, if you ask me, going forward, you will see in the new tech areas, deep tech areas, you will see startups becoming national champions only. It may happen that some of these startups may get acquired by big companies and there may be some mergers. But essential technology will be created in the startups. And this realization is not only with the, it's even with the big industries. So every big industry is today scouting to look for good startups. In fact, we as a fund have been approached by a number of big industrial houses or the family offices to participate in a fund because they feel that we can help them identify those big startups. So whether they acquire them or whether they collaborate with them or whether they fund them, it could be different models. But the fact is that in new tech area, if we do well, which I am sure we can, if we continue to keep our societies open and regulation free, then it will be the startups only who will create the national champions.
And sir, my question is that
look at, for example, fintech is a good industry. Where do all the wallets come from? Did any of the established companies put make wallets?
No.
So it will always be these startups only.
So sir, so another question is, so drone making has just emerged out of nowhere to become like, we have seen big success stories coming up, and you played a key role in revolutionizing drone making. So, sir, I just fail to understand how does a company out of nowhere come and just create a wonder? Because one of your articles were mentioned that we needed a 100 megapixel camera, and this company comes out of nowhere, decide, and they make a 1 gigapixel camera. So sir, it's just how there's this kind of...
No, I think the capability is always there. Look at this. So this particular example which you mentioned is basically chip design. You have to design the sensor chip which is doing this kind of a very minute level of... Do you know that we have the world's largest chip design industry in the country? But we don't create one single chip. And now things are changing, but practically for most part in the last 20 years, we don't create one chip. It's all, our chip design industry is catering to global majors. but the capability always existed.
Yeah.
So you had to create the ecosystem where these chips would start to get designed here.
Yeah.
And this is one such opportunity where Third Eye Tech demonstrated when defense said we need this particular chip, they were able to create this.
Yeah.
Similarly, drone. I mean, Botlab, for example, out of the blue they came.
Yeah. Drone swarms.
And created 1,000 drone swarms. In those days, because we wanted to do that show, 1,000 drone show for the Republic Day in 2022, we inquired. Of course, there was no one in India at that time.
Hundreds of crores there.
There are three countries who had the capability: China, Russia, and US.
Turkey was what about
No, Turkey even today doesn't have 1,000 drone entertainment drone shows.
Okay.
They have those small drones for war effort. We obviously couldn't have gone to China. We went to US. They said we weren't ready to do outside the country show. We're just kind of still trying, so we don't want to go and go take a risk of doing it outside the country. Russia agreed, and they were to do it. When Botlab came and said, one startup came and said, we want to do this in India and we can do 1,000 drones show. I said, but how many drones do you do now? So they're 30, 40. And this was in August, September.
Okay.
And lo and behold, I mean, it's a long story. I don't want to go into the details, but in January they did the show with 1,000 drones, and which was a big hit today. Botlab is an international company doing shows all across the world, etc. Important question I think is, which you asked is, look, we did not allow till August 2021, it was not allowed to make drones in India. So obviously Botlab could not have existed. We opened up sector in August 2021, and in less than 4 or 5 months they were able to do a 1,000 drone show. Other countries did not have such restriction, but still they are not able to do the show. So I think that's the point I was making. I started with, I said, look, I am convinced that we have talent and capability, innovative grey cells, which I think we must take advantage of it. And there are multiple examples of this, which I continue to see. Look at how many people from India have gone to Silicon Valley and done wonders there, created their money. I have so many friends in the Valley and in other parts of the world who are batchmates, etc., who went there, did some work, and all of them are, today well off because they created some technology, did well, sold off, whatever they did. And today, now the whole thing is, all these people had to go elsewhere to be able to create that wealth. Today we have the opportunity to have these people in India create that wealth for India. And that's, I think, the big opportunity.
So, sir, I also want to ask about agreements like ISET and IndusX. So, what benefits does India get exactly from having such agreements?
So, you must realize that technologically we are way, significantly behind in many conventional technologies. Second is, we also lack the ecosystem. We are, just because some things have started to happen doesn't mean that we have now capability across the field. By working along with US, which is the leader of in most advanced technologies, or among the leaders, we have an opportunity to expose our startups, our scientists, our academia to some of the best that's going on in the world, so that this helps you to immediately improve your own level. And that is, I think, the biggest advantage, so that from being confined to our own world and thinking we are doing wonderful things, we are now today exposed where the world is. And once, I think this exposure itself will do tremendous change in our capabilities. Second is, with US particularly, we have a strategic relationship, which is today fundamentally, it is above politics. It's bipartisan, both on India side as well as on the US side, because it is basis is people contact, large number of Indian diaspora that is there, and the value it creates to the US society. Our shared values of freedom, free speech, democracy, and these are, we are champions of free world across the globe, and therefore these inherent alignments that we have in our will therefore there will always be differences between countries. We are not saying culturally we are different, they are different, the language is there is different, ours is different, all those is there. But there's some basic, if you look at the global geopolitics, we have basic alignments, and therefore there is long-term likelihood of us and US working together. And therefore from this strategic partnership with US we have strategic partnership with a lot of friendly nations, but I think there's a fundamental reason why this relationship is going to remain steady and strong in the long times to come. And therefore these agreements will actually are part of that whole effort, so they are very important from that perspective.
So sir, I have a few particular questions about certain things that I'll ask. But before that, I wanted to ask that you said that there are certain startups which might get acquired by larger companies and certain consolidation that happens in every industry. So my question is, can the government step in or not step in? Is the government aware that we should not let a foreign country acquire this, or can the government do anything? Like, is it?
Yes. The government can do. So we have under our export policy, foreign trade policy, we have regulations which restrict export of certain goods, which fall under called SCOMET.
Okay.
And list 6 of SCOMET particularly. So SCOMET is a number of things, special chemicals, organisms, and something. So technology is technology. So I remember that.
Okay.
So, and one of the list 6 is related to defense, or at least defense comes in other parts also, but here. So all these require permission from the government before it can be exported.
Okay.
So it is not possible for someone to just come and acquire these startups from India.
Okay.
So if it is falling under that list, which is, and you can always keep amending the list because new technologies are coming. So you can always amend that list and add or delete things which you
think. So the government has to be very proactive.
The government has to be proactive. See, in this world, the new world, the government cannot be the government of when we joined service. Technology is actually the biggest driver of economic growth. And therefore the understanding of technology, its economic implications, its geopolitical implications is a requirement which government cannot escape. No government, irrespective of political party. So it has to be there. If they don't do this, they will not be able to take the right decisions.
So sir, I wanted to talk about, so there was the news about BOSS operating system, and then the Ministry of Defense had decided that they'll use Ubuntu fork in their computers so that we're not dependent on Microsoft or any foreign company. I should not take names. So do you think such programs are successful, or, because I think there's a very strong need for such, but do you think they can be successful in the government, or are they successful?
Not very, so we have a decision that we'll do BOSS or Ubuntu. BOSS was CDAC created software. Problem is, if the technology is moving so fast, you cannot, so you need to have measures. What is the basic requirement? Basic requirement is not whether you have BOSS, Ubuntu or Microsoft. Basic requirement is that you should have your data safe. And I think what we need to really look at is the capability to be able to keep our data safe. Unfortunately, we are very poor at it. No matter whether you're using BOSS or Ubuntu, or just because you're using an operating software system which is BOSS or open source or some other, there are multiple places where the data can leak. So just because, the point I'm making is, it's like saying my gate is very strong of the house, but my
windows
door walls itself are not strong. So how does difference does it make? So I think the debate, of course, ideally speaking, we should have all the things should be safe, and including the operating system. But then we must also create an ecosystem which will ensure that the BOSS is always updated to be able to cater to the growing demands of the operating, different applications that are going to ride on that operating system. Today, applications are coming every day, new things are happening. If your operating system is not able to handle those applications efficiently, people will not use it. So therefore, now WhatsApp, for example, you recognize that WhatsApp is a foreign application, but people continue to use WhatsApp if you don't have an application which is equally effective. So that is the point that I'm making. So therefore, I think it's important to look at cybersecurity as a whole. and not to compromise efficiency in the name of using, using indigenous. I always believe that in the name of indigenous, you cannot have users to do second, protectionism. Indigenization cannot be a second name for protectionism.
So sir, especially I want to talk about AI, especially what has happened in the last 2 days. So sir, so you were part of the government. So sir, China has emerged as it's a completely black box. Nobody really knows what's happening, and they can come out with almost magical technology overnight. So how do you see China and the kind of progress that they've made, and what can we learn from that?
So I think, and I'm again using saying facts, and I've written about this also. We must realize that China and US are the two poles, and rest of the world is pygmies in this race, including India. And China, just because US started saying we'll sanction this GPU, that GPU, China has been amassing GPUs for last 10 years. See, the strategic approach of China needs to be, we need to learn from them. They see things much earlier and work on it systematically. So today China is only second to US in terms of number of GPUs. Second, of course, we all know China has amassed data by hook and by crook. So they have huge amount of data. In fact, their own citizens' data is, there's no privacy concerns like you see in, liberal democracies. So there, you have CCTVs, you have other, and then of course they have talent, and they have worked, and they have now shown that they are able to match, if not better, what the US has done. For India, I think we need to put our act together on AI. We are behind, and we are getting further behind in this race. GPUs, people are talking of millions of GPUs. We are looking at 10,000 GPUs. I think we need to, again, the point is, one government entity, no matter how much they have tried, because there's various limitations in terms of people, scale, budget, we have to create an ecosystem, a market-oriented ecosystem where people use AI applications. We are a big country with huge demands and needs. And if we create that ecosystem, the ecosystem will ensure that adequate number of infrastructure is created and deployed, and create value in various other fields, like agriculture, like health, like education, like skilling, like, we all talk of demographic dividend and what will happen if we don't actually use it. Why can't we work on AI based systems to skill our people and to become a global manpower force? Why can't we create AI based manpower in the first place, to be able to create that kind of leverage? And the humongous need for AI manpower world over is not being met by India like we did for IT, for example, 30 years back. We're not being able to do it for AI. So the point I'm making is, we have to have an action plan for AI. Second is, of course, now today, CPU-based, AI applications and computation is, Nandan Nilekani has been working on the project for OpenAI on that. And I think we have to explore those models because we may not be able to create in the end matchable compute facility that they have. We need to leverage our data. We are the largest producer of data in the world. We could produce 20% of the world's data, but we are not able to leverage it. We don't have policies to incentivize data centers except some meager assistance of some
I think government has the Meghraj policy.
No, Meghraj is all useless.
It's not that effective.
No, it's for government. It's like, it is like a drop in the ocean, and I'm not exaggerating. What you need is, Meghraj is, the world is looking at hundreds of gigawatt of cloud capacity. Meghraj will not even be in kilowatt, even less than that. So, Meghraj is not, India's own capacity today in data center. Now, a lot of pace has come. We are hoping to reach 1 gigawatt by 2030 or something.
Yeah.
Now, the point is, if we're creating 20% of the world's data, we should have 20% data center capacity. And data center is today both in terms of data, if you have the data, as well as in terms of, manpower, electricity. It's a huge economy booster. We need to have more aggressive policies to incentivize data center, setting up of data centers in India. Except Mumbai and Chennai and Hyderabad, I don't think we're now seeing some data centers in other cities, but we don't have enough data centers. So the point I'm making is, so we need to leverage our data center. We need to create foundational models around our own capacity. We need to leverage our human resource. I mean, we need to have a strategy of our own for AI, and we cannot ape what's happening in US and China because we are way behind them.
So, sir, one question that I had was about moonshots. So, sir, this is our team came up with this, is that the Kaveri jet engine is a very critical program for us, and we have almost achieved it, but not to the level that we wanted. So, is it possible that the government puts up a committee? Because I was reading back during World War II, the US industry really came together, and within 2 years they were able to go from R&D to prototyping to proper production for their jets back in the day. So I know the technology has advanced a lot. So the question is that Kaveri jet engine, can we put a mission mode, a bunch of people together where private players are leading the charge? Because I read somewhere that Baba Kalyani had, during a question answer round, he said that I would love to do that. So do you think, is it possible that we put a private player in charge of the program and ask them to deliver in like 4 or 5 years? Is it possible?
Yeah, I think it is very much possible. In fact, this new fund which government has created for 1 lakh crore, I hope that it will take such major R&D projects which private sector on its own funding will not be able to do, because the jet engines is one such example. There are others also, which, for example, Fab now government is supporting in a big way, and we are seeing a Fab ecosystem. But I think the most important thing again is government should create an ecosystem, enabler, and not try to do it themselves. So if you create, and different bigger projects may require a different kind of a ecosystem creation, but the way to do it is to enable people to do it. And I'm sure there is absolutely, like I said, we already have, I'm seeing startups who are creating turbines of the smaller capacity. These are youngsters who, not youngsters, actually they are experienced people, 15-20 years experience, who have worked with GE, Rolls-Royce, NASA and other major global players and created engines there. They know what the hot process looks like. They did it for them, and now they're setting up startups here. So they know, they have traveled the distance, they have done this for the global biggies. We have this huge advantage of people with us, and we should leverage that. So I'm not saying who should do this, but I'm saying if we are able to leverage our talent and open it up to private sector, that would be the right way to go forward.
And so just last 2 questions. So we are aware that China resorts to a lot of big borrowing and stealing to enhance their power. So my question is that because USA also has laws that mandate firms that they have to hand over data for citizens abroad. I don't remember the exact names, but in 2017 they passed, I think, the PRISM Act, and even a few years ago they also passed that. So even USA is very, very conscious of making sure that they dominate the sector. So my question is that is the government aware, or can we take a step, and with the DPDP coming in, do you think it is an adequate step to make sure that we are digitally sovereign?
So DPDP has no digital sovereignty mandate in it. Although it has an enabling provision, the government can localize, but there is nothing that has mandated that so far, except RBI, which has mandated payment data to be localized. DPDP is an individual privacy safeguard. That because Supreme Court has said that every individual privacy is concomitant to life. It's a fundamental right. It's concomitant to life. So if you are living, you have a right to privacy, which is true. I mean, if you humiliate someone and then what is life worth? So DPDP ensures that on an online environment, a digital environment, a person's privacy is observed by people who are doing it, because digital environment enables multiple ways by which your private information can be shared or multiplied or duplicated, etc. So but there is no mandate within DPDP for creating sovereign databases. I don't think because of various reasons, but yeah, that mandate is not there.
So, sir, is it possible to think about ensuring that we are digitally sovereign? Because US is very particular about it, China is very particular about it. Is it possible within the current geopolitical situation and the constraints that governments and the industry has, is it possible to make India like completely digitally sovereign without isolating ourselves?
Yeah, so I think it's a process. I think you cannot do this overnight. Because we are so see, the problem is, so US has not mandated that the data cannot go out.
Yeah.
It is just that all the major
companies are
American companies, and so they have created the capacity. All the innovation took place in America.
Yeah.
China, of course, mandated that and created a firewall around its country's internet, and then created these apps for within China. And like I said, China saw this
coming 10 years, 20 years ago.
25 years back, and started doing this much long before. And so today they have firewall internet and their own applications, etc. I think it's we will have to look at the biggest way so it's not possible for us to say that we will go away from, let's say, from a particular application.
Okay.
In this world of technology, an application becomes less important because a more powerful application starts becoming
popular.
For example, when SMS, you had the pagers, and then you had the mobile phone, then you had the smartphone. So, you cannibalize previous technology with a more powerful, and the trick therefore is innovation.
Okay.
If you create innovation in the country, the future innovation, if it is based, that would be the easiest and the fastest way of starting creating your control in a digital or a technology dominated environment. But given the hugely, today if you say stop WhatsApp, there will be riots. Even when government suspends WhatsApp for 3 days because of law and order, there are so many objections. So therefore, the way to disrupt technology is through more innovation, not through by preventing innovation.
Okay, sir, last question. So, sir, you have had a long career, you're interacting with startups on a daily basis now. So, sir, what advice would you give to us B school students as to what we should do as we enter the corporate world? Any leadership principles or any just guiding principle for us?
No, I think we must have great amount of confidence in ourselves, belief in ourselves, because we have shown both in India and abroad that we are as good or better than the best. I think the second is, I think we need to see some of our fundamental systems which do not seem right, may actually not be right, and we should be willing to change them. So look for change all the time, in whatever environment you're working. And we must, in one of the biggest change which we must do as part of this is drop the legacy of what the British left with us, which hangs on our head. So we must take that off, because I think half the things that we still continue in the country is because the British were doing it like that, and that's one of the biggest handicap that I think we constrain ourselves with. If we do these two things, and third is, and it's been not something which is rocket science, but think differently. Think. If you think differently, I think you always can come up with the right answer which others may not have thought of.
Okay. Basically, we have to be confident, ambitious, and we have to think big.
Yeah,
to make a difference. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We had a great time, and
you.
I'm sure every B school student would have a great time listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.